Today, I'm going to get you started on your Adobe Illustrator pattern exercise. Now, in an exercise, of course, we're going to take the techniques that we've previously learned and you're going to apply them in a creative way. I'm going to take you through how I want the file to be set up, and I'm also going to take you through what patterns you're going to create. I want you to precisely match how I set the file up, but beyond that, you're on your own. I'm not going to dictate color or style or shapes to you. That is completely up to your judgment. You're going to take the skills you've learned and you're going to creatively express that in this exercise. To demonstrate your skills, you're going to create 4 patterns. You're going to create 2 seamless patterns, 1 radial pattern, and 1 grid pattern. If you need a refresher on those techniques, you can always go back to the lesson and rewatch that video. To help guide us in our designs, you're going to follow some of the basic concepts of composition as you design your patterns. So for your first seamless pattern, you're going to follow the idea of play. So in the way that you arrange your forms and choose colors, there should be a certain amount of spontaneity, of creativity, of freedom, of not abiding too close to the rules. Now, you want to be intentional in what you do and arrange things carefully, but there should be a sense of experimentation as you create that first seamless pattern. Now, your second seamless pattern is going to be based off the idea of rhythm. So that means we want to arrange our shapes in such a way that we're guiding the eye around the composition, just as we might listen to a piece of music and the beat would help guide us through. The third pattern you're going to create is a radial pattern, and you're going to follow the principle of contrast and its corollary, harmony. So we want to arrange our objects in such a way that they interplay in a way that's contrasting, that's bringing our focus to certain places, but even with the contrast, still create something that feels unified and whole. I think this will be an interesting challenge because the way a radial pattern is set up, you have things going in every single direction uniformly. So how can you bring a bit of contrast into that? How can you break up some of that uniformity? I suggest maybe you look at some of those line profiles or start with a base shape that's a little more complex that you can have some contrast within, so that when you apply the radial technique, that contrast will then come throughout the whole thing. The last pattern you're going to create is a grid pattern, and this is going to be based off the idea of balance. So this pattern should have a sense of stability, at least in some of its parts, a balance between the elements. It should still feel creative, it should still feel engaging. Doesn't mean it should be boring or stale, but we want things to feel in balance, that there's a harmony between the elements. Now, let me show you how I want your file to be set up. Start by opening up Adobe Illustrator and creating a new file. Set the size to 11 by 8.5, landscape orientation, and create 4 artboards. Now we have our file. The next thing we want to do is label our artboards. I want to be able to quickly see which artboard is which pattern and which concept you're working with. So to do that, let's create a layer, and we're going to call this new layer text. Let's go to our first artboard. I'm going to go to View, Fit Artboard to Window, which is just on a Mac Command 0, because it allows me to quickly zoom in on this artboard. Open up your Type tool, click, and let's call this Seamless Pattern Play. You can change this typeface to whatever you want it to be, but let's have it up in the corner and not too big, but enough that I can read it. The important part is how you're going to set up your seamless pattern. Just like we did in our lesson, you're going to create it on a 4-inch by 4-inch grid. So let's start with our rectangle tool. Create a 4-inch by 4-inch rectangle. I'm going to just set it as a stroke for now. And this is what you're going to use to design your shapes. So you're going to put them on the edge, and in the middle you're going to cut off anything that's bleeding off, just the way we did in our lesson, until you have a finished pattern block. Now, what I want you to do with that finished pattern block is duplicate it 3 times and arrange it in a square grid So the way we're going to do that, if we imagine that this is a finished pattern, is we're going to just duplicate it with copy and paste or step and repeat so that we have 4 instances of your seamless pattern arranged in this way on this side of the artboard. So in this way, I'll be able to see if your pattern is truly seamless, if it flows all together and I can hardly tell where one ends and one begins. Your next seamless pattern is going to be set up the same way. So all we need to do is copy this, come over to this artboard, click it to make sure it's selected, and then we're going to paste in place. Let's change the label here to rhythm. For your final 2 patterns, let's copy this from the top, and then we're just going to, again, paste in place down here. Let's change this first label to radial pattern, and play will become contrast. This last one will be a grid pattern, and we're going to change this to balance. Now, we won't need to replicate the pattern in the same way we did the seamless pattern, but let's set a box that will give us a margin where I want you to put the pattern in. So when you create your radial pattern and your grid pattern, place them inside this square. And with your labels set, let's lock that layer, select your art layer, and now you're ready to begin creating your patterns. So when you're done designing, your file should look something like this. You'll have your pattern block, and you'll have it repeated. You'll have over here a pattern block, a different design, of course, than what you had over here, repeated, a radial pattern inside this square, and then a grid pattern of some size in this square. Again, this is up to you how you want to design it. So your composition will look different than mine. You could introduce color, you could use typography, though I would say don't use words, but you can use letters and design with those. So when your design is all set, you're going to save this as a PDF, and you're going to submit that PDF on Canvas. I've made a separate video about saving as a PDF that goes into a little more detail, but I'll take you basically through it now. I'm going to go up to File, Save a Copy. We're just going to call this AI Pattern Exercise. I'm going to put my last name at the end, and I'm going to change the format to PDF. I'm going to make sure that all artboards are selected because I want you to submit all 4 artboards. I'm going to click Save. It'll bring up this dialog box with PDF options. Just click the Illustrator default, and what we want to do is unclick all of these options except View PDF after saving. So with that done, we just click Save PDF. Adobe Acrobat should open for us, and we can see our 4 pages. So take this PDF and submit it on Canvas.